in this episode of the FitFarm podcast. Your host, Joey, talks to me, Sal Di Stefano, from the Mind Pump podcast for the full duration of this episode.
Welcome to FitFarm, a show dedicated to creating a better life through fitness and the grappling arts. I'm Joseph Aronson.
I'm Jackie Baker. It's time to get jacked.
Nice, man. Like that to me is almost the same as like Bruce Buffer is to fight fans, or to like the podcasting world. Like you're the Bruce Buffer of podcasts.
That's rad.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
How did that come about? Like, I mean, you say that every episode now. Is that
everything we do here is like almost everything we do is not planned. So like we started recording our intros after we were done with our episode because we started recognizing that our audience was pretty divided. We had people who loved the first 30 to 50 minutes of bullshitting current events, and then we had another chunk of our audience who just liked the fitness stuff. So, and people would have to either fast forward or whatever. So we said, let's record an intro. So we tell people what's happening so they know when to if they want to fast forward, what to skip and what we talk about in the intro. So when we started doing that, I just said, hey, in this episode of Mind Pump, and it just became a thing.
So it's like DVR for podcasts pretty much, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. So if we could fill anyone listening in that isn't familiar with you, just like a quick background about you and what you guys do.
So I started off in fitness at the age of 18 as a personal trainer, and I'd been doing it for 2 decades, 20 years. Gosh, that sounds like a long time, doesn't it?
You sound old now. What are you doing? You're aging yourself here.
Yeah, it's big time. I know. I was always the young guy in the gym. You know what I mean? I was managing gyms at 19 years old. So my entire staff was older than me. And it's weird to be the old guy, I guess, in fitness now. Now I'm talking to people in their 20s and 30s, and I'm talking about the, old school stuff. It's pretty funny. But, yeah, I started off as a trainer at 18, managed gyms at 19. At 22, I bought my own wellness studio facility where I had personal trainers and massage therapists and acupuncturists working under me. And I did that for, I want to say 12 years, I think. And then started Mind Pump with Adam, Justin. Those are my 2 co-hosts, and Doug, and that's our producer. And we started that podcast about a little over 3 years ago. And about a little over a year into it, we went full time. We monetized the podcast. I sold my gym. Everybody quit their jobs. And we've been doing this ever since. And the shows seems to have resonated with people. And of course, we couldn't be happier. But it's been a great time. It's been an absolute great time, and I get to do what I've always loved doing, which is talk to people. I love talking to people. I love talking.
I've noticed.
And I love fitness. Right? Yeah, exactly. It's funny when I was a kid, my mom told me when I was a big mouth when I was a kid, hard to believe, and my mom used to tell me that my mouth was either going to get me thrown in jail or make me a lot of money one day. So. I'm glad I haven't been to jail yet. That's all I can say.
Glad it ended up being the latter of the two, right?
Exactly.
So do you mind if I just rewind things for a second here? I'm kind of curious. Have you always been in the West Coast area then, or have you moved around quite a bit, or is that kind of where you were brought up and everything?
No, I was so I'm the product of Sicilian immigrants. So both my parents were born in Sicily, very poor. And I'm a first-generation American, born in San Jose, California. And for the most part, this is where I've been. I've had short periods of, at one point, I lived in Palm Desert, which is a suburb of Palm Springs. I actually owned a share of a health club down there when I was 21. I also lived in San Diego for a short period of time. But otherwise, Bay Area, Silicon Valley, I've been here most of this time.
Okay. I've heard you guys joke around saying I think if I remember correctly, you're the least athletic of the 3 as far as playing sports.
Yeah, I'm not, I was never into traditional sports growing up. I did it, I played them as a kid, outside, but I never was on a team. I didn't join any. I mean, I did a little bit of flag football and stuff like that, but never. I didn't play high school sports or anything like that. I did judo as a kid. I competed in judo when I was 12 to 14, and then I did Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in my 20s, and I did that for about 6 years and got myself up to a purple belt and did a little bit of competition there. But really, my athletic background really revolves around exercise, fitness. Like I loved barbell training and dumbbell training. I loved bodybuilding. Got really into the history and sport of bodybuilding, not as a competitor, but just as a fan. But no, I was much more of an intellectual, I guess, if you will. I mean, I don't know if you had to label it. I just loved to read. So as a kid, I would, friends would be outside playing and they'd come knock on my door, and I'd tell my mom to tell them that I was sick or I wasn't home so that I could sit on the couch and read the encyclopedia. I'm not making this up. I actually read the I started off with the Snoopy's encyclopedia as a young kid and eventually graduated when I was a teenager to the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I would just go through the encyclopedia and read about interesting shit. So my parents weren't sure if they needed to be worried or happy, that I was, into learning, or worried that I wasn't like out there doing a lot of stuff with a lot of different kids. But I was just a little different. I like to learn these types of things, and I'm still kind of like that. I'm a little bit different, hopefully in a good way. But yeah, that's it. So least athletic, yeah. I mean, Justin played college sports. Adam played sports his entire life. That I'm very, very different in that regard. Now, here's the funny thing, though. I will say this: we have actually competed head to head at one time. So one time, Adam, Justin, and I competed in a game of horse in basketball. So it's not really basketball,
sure.
But we did play horse, and I did win. I did win horse. So if they ever say that I'm the least athletic, I like to bring that up because it really irritates the shit out of them.
Yeah.
And for sure, they're way more athletic than me. So that's not what I'm saying at all. All I'm saying is the only time we've ever competed, I was the victor. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Right. So I was, my audience is actually pretty deeply rooted in grappling as far as wrestling and jiu-jitsu and all that. So I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about that if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
So what got you into judo first?
So my dad, growing up in Sicily, he was very poor, and he worked since he was 9 years old, and he would give his money to his mom, and then she would give him a little bit for himself to like go watch a movie or something like that every once in a while. And he eventually started saving his money, and I'm not quite sure how he found the local judo school, but he did, and had saved up enough money to buy himself a second-hand gi, and ended up doing judo. So he'd go to work real hard, and he used to, he would work in construction, and then after that he'd put on his gi and run over to judo, and he did exceptionally well in a very short period of time. He was a badass. He actually competed, and on the I want to say the national level. And did very, very well and loved it. And then when he moved to America at the age of 19 to marry my mom, he stopped. He started working. He ended up saving his money and bought a house, and he had kids. But he always remembered judo. It's like part of my dad's blood. He just loves it. Always used to talk about it when I was a kid. So fast forward, I'm 12 years old. My dad can't find any really good judo schools here near us, and he hears about one in Japantown in downtown San Jose Buddhist Judo Club. Actually, turns out that judo school is one of the oldest ones in the country. I think it was founded in 1950-something. And then, of course, San Jose State has an excellent judo club. So he brought us as kids, and we did judo with my dad. And, I liked it. I enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite thing to do, and I think part of it was because I felt like I was kind of being forced because my dad was like, no, you got to do judo, and I like it so much. The other thing, too, is my dad is exceptionally athletic and strong. Like, he's a He's a freak of nature. He's not a big guy. He's about 5'10", maybe 180 pounds or 175 pounds, but just one of the strongest people I've ever, and still to this day, one of the most strongest natural dudes I've ever met in my life. I mean, I remember as a kid lifting weights in the backyard and being really proud that I could overhead press a 135-pound barbell, and he cleaned it with one arm, and this is after he's like, he's an older man and not even working out anymore. So just a very strong guy. So part of the reason why maybe I didn't enjoy it as much as I felt like I could never live up to him. But anyway, I still enjoyed it. I did it, I competed. And then when I got into lifting weights at the age of 14, I stopped doing judo because I just wanted to lift weights. And I didn't pick up any type of grappling until I was in my 20s as an adult, and that was on my own, my own accord.
Okay. What drove you to that then, to the jiu-jitsu side of it?
Oh, that was the UFC, man. I remember watching the first UFC, and I think that's probably, 1994, if I'm not mistaken, or 95.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was watching TV one day, and I see this commercial for, the ultimate, martial artist. Which martial art is superior, Is it judo? Is it jiu-jitsu? Is it kung fu? Is it kickboxing? Is it, karate? Now, when I was a kid, I was, like most kids my age, especially at that time, I fucking loved, Bruce Lee. I loved Chuck Norris. I loved kung fu movies. And I thought, the biggest badasses were these dudes that could do, spinning back kicks and backflips and, crazy acrobatic moves and
fight five guys at once, right?
Yeah, right. Like Bruce Lee could kick everybody's ass, and it's like this, whatever. So I'm like, oh shit, this is going to be awesome. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. So I showed my dad. My dad, of course, being a martial arts fan, was like, totally going to order this. So we order this, right? And so out come these fighters, and you had boxers and brawlers and kung fu guys and karate guys.
Yeah, they had no weight classes either, right? It was a free for all.
There was no rules. The only rules were you can't bite, you can't eye gouge, and that's it. You could actually hit someone in the nuts in the early one.
Yeah.
People don't realize that. You could literally stomp on someone's balls in the first UFCs, okay?
Yeah.
But yeah, no gloves, no rounds, no time limits. It was as close as you could get to a, quote unquote fair street fight, right? One-on-one.
Oh.
No rounds either. If the fight just went forever until the fight was over.
I mean, they had guys come out in gis. They had guys in wrestling shoes too. They had no, like you said, no dress code even. It was just whatever.
Dude, it was literally the test of which martial art and which martial artist was the best. And this is like an age-old question that, those of us who are into martial arts, or even if you're just a freaking kid who loved watching those movies, everybody wants to know which martial art's the best, right? That's like the big thing. And a lot of egos were bruised that day. So out come the fighters. They're walking out, and I'm like, oh, that guy does kung fu. He's going to win for sure, because I was a big kung fu fan. And, oh, wow, that guy's all big and strong. He's totally going to win.
Yeah, he's jacked.
And then, yeah, he's so buff, right? And then this, skinny, weak-looking, Brazilian dude walks out in a gi, and I'm like, oh, man, that guy's going to get his ass kicked so hard, right?
Yeah.
And so my dad, having been a judo guy and also having grown up in the rough and tumble streets of Sicily, he knew how effective his judo was when he would get in fights. And he's like, he was saying this the whole time. He's like, I don't know, Sal. He goes, the guys who can wrestle are going to do really well. And I'm like, there's no way. He's not going to get his hands on him. As soon as he tries to grab him, the other guy's going to punch him in the face or kick him in the head and knock him out. There's no way. So we're watching this, and, me and my dad are arguing. And one by one, Hoist Gracie systematically takes down and chokes out every single one of his opponents. Every single one.
Yep.
And I was just like, what is going on here? My dad's like, I told you. And then I remember one of the fights was with what was his name? Gerard Perdot, I think was his name, or something like that. I know I'm saying his name wrong. He was that Savate fighter from France. And the Savate fighter, Savate is like this French kickboxing. It's actually a pretty badass form of kickboxing. They train full contact, so they actually know how to fight. And he fights this sumo wrestler, and the sumo wrestler charges him down the cage. He shifts to the side, so the sumo wrestler misses, hits the cage, falls down, tries to stand back up. As he's getting up, the Savate fighter, kicks him in the teeth and knocks out like 4 of his teeth, like right there on TV. And I was like, holy cow, this guy's a badass. Then he fights another guy and just beats the shit out of him with his bare hands. Then Hoist Gracie has to fight him. I'm like, he's going to get his ass kicked. Hoist takes him down, chokes him out. I mean, he beats everybody that way. Ends up fighting Ken Shamrock, who looks like a bodybuilder. Chokes him out. Wins the whole thing. And I was just stunned. I was like, this is insane. How did this happen? So I still wasn't 100% convinced, but I was for sure like blown away. And then I watched UFC 2, UFC 3, and Hoist Gracie at this point, I think he's just the god and invincible. But at this point, I'm realizing, grappling and technique are so damn effective against a bigger, stronger opponent. And so it just got, in my head. And so what we used to do is I didn't sign up for jiu-jitsu or anything, but what we would do is we would grapple at my house. We used to clear out the living room. We had carpet in there. And me and my dad, and then I had a friend, my friend Richie, we would all do jiu-jitsu and judo, and my dad would kind of teach us on the carpet, and we'd practice and, try doing these different techniques and stuff like that. And it was super rudimentary, but it was really fun, and we did it. And, in high school, I remember I ended up getting in a fight with some guy, and I like took him down. It was so easy because the guy didn't know how to grapple, and I choked him to sleep and got up, and then he woke up, and that was it. Like, nobody got really hurt, and I won the fight, and, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But it was always in the back of my mind. But, 18 years old, I start becoming a personal trainer, and I dive myself deep into my career. So I literally just didn't have any time, or at least didn't make any time for jiu-jitsu until I'm in my, I want to say, let's see, if I did it for that long, I was probably in my early 20s. And so now I want to say I'm like 24 maybe 23. And at this time, I owned my own wellness facility. And, I was able to, although I worked a lot of hours, because I owned the place, I was able to kind of make my schedule a little bit. And so I was able to make, I was able to dedicate some time to, if I wanted to do jiu-jitsu. And, the cool thing about working out with weights is if you know what you're doing, you can do it whatever time you find.
Yeah.
So that's the cool thing. And the hard thing about jiu-jitsu or judo or something or any type of, sport or skill like that is you can't really learn it. I mean, you can learn some on your own, but it's not even close to being able to go to a class with an instructor and have like a bunch of sparring partners. So that was always tough, right?
Yeah, you need bodies.
Yeah, I got to go to a designated time. But at this point, I'm like, I think I might be able to make some time for this. So I'm like 24 years old. I have a little bit of judo under my belt, maybe a couple years as a kid, and I messed around. So I'm not like a total beginner. I have a basic understanding, but I'm not, by any means or stretch of the imagination, good or proficient in anything. So I find a jiu-jitsu school here in San Jose, Claudio França, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He actually hosts the U.S. Open tournament. So luckily for me, it was a good school. I found a great school. So I walk in, and it's an afternoon class. It was like I think it was at noon, which was perfect for me. So I walk in. There's like, people are kind of showing up, and the instructor is this purple belt, and his name is Noman. He's now a good friend of mine, and he's this kind of skinny, kind of flabby Indian dude. Okay, so he's like 160-pound dude that if you saw him in regular clothes walking down the street, for sure you'd think he was, a techie. You're like, oh, that guy sits behind a desk at Google or something like that,
sure.
Right? Doesn't look intimidating or, fit or strong by any stretch of the imagination. Besides his cauliflower ear, you would never know, right? So he's the guy teaching the class. He's a purple belt. So I walk in at the beginning, introduce myself, and I'm like, and by the way, at this point, I'd been lifting weights really, really hard for a long time. And at this point, I'm taking lots of supplements. I was actually taking pro hormone supplements, which are basically designer steroids that they used to sell over the counter.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a big dude, right? I'm like 220 pounds, 6 foot, and I'm strong as fuck. I'm compared to the average person, I'm pretty strong. Definitely compared to this guy, I'm strong. If we were to go, work out in the gym, I could probably lift what he could lift plus him hanging on the bar. So I see this guy, shake his hand, and I'm really respectful because I had learned, etiquette in judo. One of the things I love about, the Asian martial arts, or at least judo, is lots of respect, a lot of respect. A little bit different with Brazilian martial arts, where it's more relaxed. But when you go to judo, it's like you bow, you clean the mat afterwards, like we used to sweep and wash the mats, and you treat the sensei like he's like, okay, that's the guy that you respect. You don't talk or whatever.
Yes, master.
So I had that,
right?
Yeah, I had that understanding, right? So I shook his hand and I was very respectful, which is good because, I later learned that if you're an asshole and you go into a jiu-jitsu school, especially in the kind of these days, you might get you're put to sleep or something. But anyway, it was really respectful, super cool guy, and he's like, yeah, you can try the class out. So I signed the waiver. I do all the warm-ups with them. I do the workout. I do the drills. At the end, the last hour of class, because it's a 2-hour class, he's like, okay, we're all going to spar now. So I'm like, oh, cool, I want to spar. And he's like, well, no, you can't. He's like, you haven't joined yet, and you're really new, and we usually don't let people spar unless they have a little bit more experience, whatever. I don't remember what the reason was. So I'm like, hey man, I'm like, listen, I have a judo background. He's like, well, you're a big guy. Everybody in class is not. I don't really have somebody to kind of match you. So if you go against someone else, just watch for your strength when you go against beginners. I said, no problem. And he goes, you know what? I tell you what. He goes, why don't you just go against me? That way, nobody will get hurt or whatever. So I'm looking at this guy. Now, I know jiu-jitsu is effective, and I know I don't know jiu-jitsu, or at least I know little of it. And I know he's, that guy's he's obviously teaching the class, so he knows something. But I also look at him, and I'm like, he's not a big dude. He's not a strong dude. I'm like, let's see what happens. I thought to myself that he would just be able to hold me off. Like, I'm like, well, he's really good, so I probably won't be able to get him. This is what I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
So I go against this guy, and, we roll for about, 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. He tapped me out like 5 times. Like,
sure.
Like I sounded like a typewriter. I end up, I remember vividly, like the first thing I did was he's sitting on his butt because he's like, all right, he gives me the little handshake or whatever. All right, begin. He's sitting on his butt. So I know a little bit kind of what to do. So I know not to jump in his guard. Mm-hmm. So I reach underneath his legs and I put him up on his head and smash him on the ground. And he just pops up behind me and chokes me out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, whoa, that was fast. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be more careful now. So now I'm going, and by the way, the first time I go, I'm not going full strength because I don't want to hurt him. That's what I'm thinking.
Did you have a gi on too the first time, or was you didn't have a gi with you either?
I didn't even have a gi on.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go a little bit harder now. So now I go a little bit harder. Chokes me again. This time he throws me in a guillotine so fast. It was, I tapped so fast because I choked so hard. It was hilarious. So now I'm like, oh hell no, I'm going to go hard now. Like this is insane. So now I'm going really hard, and he's fucking me up. So after the end of this thing, I go outside, and I'm breathing so hard because I had exerted all my effort. I basically throw up in the bushes. I come inside, and I signed up on the spot. And I thought to myself, like, if this guy, who's this, like, much smaller and weaker than I am, can kick my ass that fast and that easily and that effectively, I can't imagine what I can do, what I'm going to be able to do when I get as good as he is. Like, that's incredible. And the technique was it blew me away at how effective his technique was, where his leverage was so good, where my strength, my advantage didn't mean nearly as much as it would without his technique. You know what I mean? The leverage was just insane. Right. So I signed up on the spot and just had a great time with it and did that for I want to say about 6 years for the most part.
Okay. Now, why did you stop training? Did you get injured or something, or just time, or?
6 years into it, my business really needed my attention, and so I just applied myself to my work, and that meant I couldn't, like the busiest times that clients wanted to come in and hire me, and I needed the money, were at times that classes were being taught. So I would miss classes, and then I would only be able to go on like an open mat on a weekend. And then before I knew it, I had to train people on the weekend. And then before I knew it, I just stopped training, and I would go super sporadic. And then little by little, I just totally stopped training. And then not too long after that, my health just went really bad, which is that's a whole nother story. I don't know if you want to get into, but I had to completely change my approach to fitness and nutrition to get my body healthy. And then shortly after that, I met Doug and then created the first MAPS program, and then that's what takes us into Mind Pump. But at some point, I think I want to go back and study and train again. Towards the end of my jiu-jitsu, training career, if you will, I was really getting into the no-gi, techniques. I was looking at sambo techniques. I was looking at catch wrestling. Just having a lot of fun with, different kinds of positions and moves and stuff like that. So at some point, I'm pretty sure I'll end up going back to it. But just at the moment, my heart is so focused on other things that I wouldn't do it justice, I don't think.
Yeah. That's understandable. And I guess that's something you can always tell Justin and Adam, too, if they ever start talking about athletics. You can probably kick their ass if you're a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. Right? There's that.
Maybe. I don't like to talk like that so much. I'm not really a violent person.
Sure.
But yeah, it's it doesn't bother me when they say that. It's all fun and games.
It seems like most people, that's their end all, right? Like, I can beat you at basketball. Well, I can kick your ass. Like, okay, that's not what we're talking about, but all right.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, right. Did you ever compete too in jiu-jitsu as an adult?
Yeah, I did 3 tournaments. So I did let me see. Did I do 3 tournaments or 4? I want to maybe 3. First tournament I was a white belt, and I threw the guy. I did a judo throw. Here's something I learned about jiu-jitsu. I don't know if this is true today because it's been a while, but the stand-up was terrible with the jiu-jitsu guys.
Awful. Still.
The little bit of judo I had made me like an expert in stand-up compared to those guys. So I threw the guy, but with the momentum of the throw, he ended up rolling over on top of me and side mount, and then mounted me, and then he won by points. The second tournament I did was the Gracie. Oh, it was the Gracie Invitational in San Francisco, and I got first place in that one. That was as a blue belt, and then as a purple belt, I competed. I think it was as a purple belt. I competed in the U.S. Open, and I lost. So those are my three tournament experiences.
Oh, that's awesome. One thing I wanted to touch on was kind of the difficulties in training for a jiu-jitsu competition, because it's not like your average sport where you're going to train in just one specific energy pathway. I didn't know if there was a certain periodized way that you prepped yourself for a competition. I mean, because
so I learned
you can't take like the marathon approach. You can't take the the sprinter approach. You're kind of in between,
Oh yeah, no, I learned very quickly that the best way to build conditioning and fitness for jiu-jitsu, not the only way, and it's not the only way you should train, but the best way in terms of carryover, like you'll see it and you feel it when you're competing or when you're sparring, is to do more jiu-jitsu. There's nothing nothing will make you better or more fit for jiu-jitsu if you had to just pick one thing than doing actual jiu-jitsu. And I know that sounds obvious.
Yeah.
Like people are like, oh, well, yeah, no shit. But it's actually not obvious with fitness people. People think, oh, I want to get, more conditioning for basketball. I'm going to go run. Or I want to get more conditioning for boxing. I'm going to go run. Or I want to get, I'm just going to lift weights and do circuits and crazy CrossFit workouts to improve my conditioning for my sport. Will you get more conditioning from doing all those things? Yeah, there's some carryover, but nothing comes close to doing the actual sport itself. And part of the reason is it's, first off, the type of conditioning you need for your sport is going to be very specific to your sport. And so what I mean by that is you could take an incredibly fit boxer. So take a boxer who's just very good at boxing. And he or she is going to notice that their fitness level isn't going to be on par if they go wrestle or grapple or swim or, do another sport, for example. Because I noticed that you'd get these boxers who come to jiu-jitsu, and yes, they're definitely more fit than a regular guy coming off the street, but they don't have that it's not the same level of fitness in jiu-jitsu until they get good at the skill of fitness in jiu-jitsu, and the same is vice versa. Like, you could be an incredible grappler with your fitness. Like, you could go, match after match after match, then go try to box, and you notice you get tired faster. And it's because, part of conditioning is your skill, is how efficient you're able to move the way you want it to move. Like, if you look at the calorie burn, if you take a high-level cyclist, let's say you take somebody who cycles professionally or competes at a high level, and you measure the amount of calories that they burn in a 1-hour cycling event, and then you measure the amount of calories, and let's say you average that out over, so in a 20-minute period, this is how much they burn cycling. Then you have them go swim or run. They'll burn more calories swimming and running. Now, it's not because swimming and running burn more calories necessarily. It's because their bodies have become so efficient and effective at cycling, because they've learned the skill of it, that they're able to conserve energy, and which means that now they have more stamina for their skill. So when you do jiu-jitsu and you're, on the ground, you'll notice like a black belt just moves efficiently.
Oh, they never get tired. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of it is, they're fit, definitely, but part of it is they just know they know how to move. They've learned how to move, and now it's not even a conscious thing. It's not even something they think about. They move in a way where it just feels effortless. It's like, when you first learn jiu-jitsu, it's like throwing someone in water who doesn't know how to swim. You expend a shit ton of energy trying to stay afloat. But once you learn how to swim, you could sit there and tread water forever. It's similar with anything. So if you want to improve your fitness for jiu-jitsu, do more jiu-jitsu. That's number one. Now, if you want to add additional things to that, which I also think is very smart and will make you a more effective jiu-jitsu fighter, then you want to not necessarily try to train or lift weights like you do jiu-jitsu. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're doing jiu-jitsu and you're like, okay, what I need is more stamina. I just need a lot more stamina. So what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go lift weights with a bunch of circuits. I'm going to take 5 exercises. I'm going to do one after another, no rest, and make it really hard. That's not the most effective use of your time with weights. If you want more stamina, do more jiu-jitsu. If you want to use weights for what weights are very good at that you won't get from jiu-jitsu, use weights to build strength. Because that's the one thing that lifting weights can do that better than anything. Like jiu-jitsu you'll get stronger, of course, but you're not going to get as strong as you would if you just trained weights. Like a weightlifter or a powerlifter or a bodybuilder, objectively speaking, is stronger or builds more strength because weights do a really fucking good job at making you stronger. It's a tool that's specifically effective for that. It's like a hammer, right? Yeah. A hammer hammers nails really, really well. A hammer doesn't, saw wood in half very well. Could you use it to cut a piece of wood in half? I guess you could figure out a way to use a hammer to do that, but it would just be not very effective. So if you want to use other forms of training for jiu-jitsu, use those forms of training for what they're good at. So if you want more flexibility for jiu-jitsu, well, what's a good tool for flexibility? Yoga. Go do some yoga, and that's a great way of building flexibility for jiu-jitsu. Yoga is good at that, right? You're not going to go do yoga to get stronger or to build more stamina. You're going to do yoga to get flexible. If you want more strength for jiu-jitsu, go lift weights, and lift weights in a way that's going to make you stronger. So some of the most effective training you can do with resistance training is straight up old school strength training with barbells.
Compound moves, right?
Compound movements, gross motor movements, like get your deadlift. I tell you what, if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, get your squat, your deadlift, your overhead press, your rows, get those really good and strong, and then watch how that strength translates to your technique as you're doing your jiu-jitsu. So, and I would teach the guys, and once I learned this, I'd teach the guys I trained with, and I'd say, hey man, I know you're doing all these circuits and stuff when you're lifting weights. Forget that. If you need more stamina, do more jiu-jitsu. Lift weights a couple days a week, but just focus on doing 5 sets of 5 reps, and just try to get stronger and then see how that translates. And they would come back and be like, oh shit, man, I'm so much stronger, in my guard. I'm so much stronger when I mount someone or when I'm a half guard and I'm trying to go for a submission. I just feel so much more stable and strong. So that's really my advice, is use tools for what those tools are designed, or at least what those tools are effective at doing, and apply that to your training. But nothing should ever replace jiu-jitsu training or sport-specific training for your sport. Because one of the other things that can happen is you'll see somebody who's training in a sport, and we'll talk about jiu-jitsu because that's the topic. Somebody who's doing jiu-jitsu, and let's say they're doing 3 days a week of jiu-jitsu or 4 days a week of jiu-jitsu, and they're like, wow, I want to improve my strength for jiu-jitsu, so I'm going to replace one of my grappling days with barbells. So now instead of doing 3 days a week of jiu-jitsu, they're doing 2 days a week and weight training.
Yeah.
Might not be the best trade-off. Probably not a good trade-off, because you're going to get more out of the jiu-jitsu training than you will with the resistance training. Now, at some point, there's, if you're doing 7 days a week of jiu-jitsu, you've got really good conditioning. Can you take away a little bit of jiu-jitsu and replace it with other forms of training? Yes, and at that point, it might become a good idea to prevent overuse injuries from doing so much of the same type of movements. But that's a much more technical conversation. But yeah, I mean, what's important is that you continue doing your jiu-jitsu training, because as you get stronger, like, let me give you an example. Let's say you've been doing jiu-jitsu for 5 years, you train consistently for 4 days a week, and you decide you're going to take 3 months off of jiu-jitsu and just focus on getting stronger. So 3 months, no jiu-jitsu at all. You go lift weights and you build 10 pounds of solid muscle. You add 70 pounds or 100 pounds to your deadlift. You add 70 pounds to your squat, 30 pounds to your bench press, your overhead press, 30 pounds. I mean, you're just a bigger, stronger guy. And then you go back to jiu-jitsu to roll and spar with these other people. You're probably not going to be as good as you were when you left, because you've created this bigger body with more strength, but you haven't integrated it with your technique. And so what I mean by that is, let me give you another example. If I could snap my fingers right now and give you 15 pounds of muscle and make you 20% stronger right now, you go back to jiu-jitsu tomorrow, you're awkward.
Yes.
You don't know how to move in your body anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that you continue to focus on your skill and your technique and make that the absolute priority, because otherwise, and we've seen this before with like MMA fighters where they're like, oh, I'm gonna focus on getting bigger and stronger, and then they show up in the octagon and they're significantly bigger and stronger, but then they don't have as much stamina and their technique isn't as effective, and then they kind of get their butt kicked.
Yep. And
it's because you're not as effective in your body because you haven't trained in that new body as much. It's no different than watching it's like when they talk about old man strength.
Yes.
Like you got that 18-year-old kid who's big and strong because he just went through puberty, he's got all that testosterone, and then he goes and wrestles his 45-year-old dad, and his 45-year-old dad kicks his ass. And, he's like, oh, man, that's weird. He's got old man strength. Well, no, it's because he's been in his body for longer than you have. So he's just much more, he's not as awkward in it. It's like when you watch a puppy grow real fast and they get real awkward at first. So technique and skill, ultimate number one priority. And then sprinkle in your training and use the training as they're at most effective. So if you're going to lift weights, do it to get stronger. If you're going to run, use running the way that running is effective for building maybe long-term stamina, or maybe to improve your explosive sprint type of strength. If you're going to do yoga, use it to improve flexibility, those kinds of things. And then when you start to supplement your training with that mentality, then you start to see how effective your programming can be.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you said that, because I've got a buddy that's I've been training with forever, and he's always trying to go do circuit training at the gym to supplement his jiu-jitsu. I'm like, you know what? Let's maybe get you doing these compound lifts. Let's get you doing deadlifting and squatting. And I can't seem to talk him into it. So maybe if I have someone else say it and I have him listen to it, maybe he'll listen.
Oh yeah, have him listen, have him try it. Once he tries it, and he'll know within a couple weeks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Within a couple weeks, he'll go train jiu-jitsu and be like, oh wow, I can feel the carryover now.
Right. Mind if I switch it up here and talk more about podcasting?
Oh yeah, no problem. Let's do it.
Okay. I was curious, what made you leave the gym and start podcasting full time? I mean, was there a defining moment or something that happened that said, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to chase this?
Yeah, so I started training Doug, our producer, I want to say 2 years before we started the podcast. So Doug came to me as a client, and I started training him. And he had a long history of exercise and resistance training, nutrition. So he wasn't a beginner, but he had a bad back, and he came to me to heal his back. And, you know, he told me all the information he knew about working out, and I totally, you know, countered all of that and taught him that most of that stuff was bullshit and started training him.
Mm-hmm.
Within a short period of time, got strong. He felt good. But he was also just on the side, he was, as a hobby, he enjoyed media. So he also enjoyed internet marketing. He enjoyed just, you know, motivational speakers. He liked all that stuff. And so about, you know, 6 months into our training, he came up to me and he's like, man, he goes, you remind me of Tony Robbins, you know, that motivational speaker.
Yeah, I've thought the same thing.
Well, so he was the third person to tell me that in you know, relatively short period of time. So I was like, well, you know, that's weird. You're the third person to tell me that. Maybe I should pay attention. And so he told me, he says, listen, he goes, if you ever, he says, you know, on the side, I like to study internet marketing and media. If you ever want to create a program or product with me, I'll produce the whole thing. I know how to do all that. You just, you know, create it. And I think we could probably sell it online as a product. Now, at this time, I didn't have anything. I had no idea what that would look like. I'd always thought about writing a book, but I didn't know what the book would look like. So I kind of sat on the idea. And I think maybe a few months later, you know, he would every once in a while he'd bring it up, and I'd tell him, well, I don't really have anything, you know, and so we kind of leave it there. It was a few months later. I was up late one night, and I was reading the New England Journal of Medicine, and the study pops up, and I'm reading the study, and it really blew me away. And one of the things that blew me, and I'll give you a short synopsis of it. Basically, they compared groups of men. You know, this group over here lifts weights naturally. This group over here lifts weights and takes steroids. This group over here does nothing, and this group over here does nothing and takes steroids. So I looked at the results, and what blew me away was the group that did nothing and took steroids built more muscle than the group that lifted weights and didn't take steroids. So that was crazy to me because I'm like, wow, you take steroids and don't do anything in a short period of time. It was a short study. It was like 2 months long. You actually build more muscle than somebody who's lifting weights in the gym but doesn't take steroids. And the reason why this blew me away is because I was under the impression that you had to create muscle damage to signal the body to build muscle. That's what lifting. I thought you lift weights, you create all this damage, you get sore, and that's what makes your body build muscle. Well, that didn't happen with these people taking steroids. They just sat on the couch. And so I started to, you know, this is like, I don't know, it was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night when I'm reading the study, and it was like lightning hit me. And I get this every once in a while. I get a little hypomanic where I'll get focused on a topic, and then that's it. I can't shut it off. So immediately I was like, holy shit, man. There's a lot of other signals that your body uses to build muscle. And this study, it was a hormonal one, right? It was testosterone. But I wonder how many others I can find. So I'm up till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning researching, and I end up writing the blueprints for the first MAPS program, MAPS Anabolic. So the next day I trained Doug. I think I might have even texted him early in that morning. I'm like, hey, man, I haven't slept. I got this great idea. I got the idea. So I present it to him. I'm like, dude, I think this is going to fucking blow people away. I've been in fitness a long time. It makes perfect sense. It's kind of mirroring what I'm learning about training people that I've learned through training people this long. And there's these other new techniques and things and principles that I want to start applying. But we got to test it first. I want to test it on you. I'm going to test it on myself. I'm going to test it on some other clients. And I had a female friend of mine that tested it. I had a trainer friend of mine. And so it was like 15 of us that tested these theories and concepts. And so I said, let's test it first and then see what it looks like. So we tested it, blew everybody's mind. Everybody was building muscle. Everybody was getting great results. So now I had something that I believed in that I could sell, because I knew I could sell, but I needed something that I believed in. I wasn't just going to sell something for the sake of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought I was going to write a book and Doug was going to market it. And Doug said, no, I'm going to put you on video and you are going to sell on video. You're going to talk to people, which intimidated me at first because I'd never done that. I'd never been on video before. I was like, well, you want me to talk on a video? Like, this is weird. And he's like, yeah, we're going to write a script and we're going to have cameras and we'll set up your gym like a studio and it'll take a whole day to do some of the stuff. So I was a little intimidated, but something inside me was like, all right, we'll give this a shot. Let's do this. So we recorded the first videos for MAPS Anabolic. And I'll never forget, he turns on the camera and tells me to go. And like a light switch, I was there, man. Like the Sal you hear on the podcast, like that came out right there on video. And it felt, I'd had that feeling before. I know what it feels like. And the best way to describe it is it's a feeling where you do something once and right away, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's hard to explain. But if you've ever felt it, like this is part of my purpose. Like this is what I'm supposed to do. And the only other time I'd felt that was when I first became a personal trainer, and then when I started managing, teams of people. Like when I was a leader, I felt that too. Like the first day I walked in, all staff meeting, 50 employees, and I stood up on the table and did my meeting, and I was like I'm on, right?
Yeah.
So I felt that again in front of a camera. So I was like, oh shit, this is what I'm supposed to do. So we record a bunch of material. We record the whole program. We create the program. So it's this online portal. You go on there, you sign up, and it's me talking about the workouts and demoing the exercises and doing all that. And then we recorded this, like 20-minute sales video that we were going to use to market online. And during this period of time, me and Doug are going to internet marketing, conventions and classes, and we're paying people to coach us and teach us what to do. And so we create sales funnels, and, this is all internet marketing jargon, but basically we create this whole system of how we're going to market this and how we're going to get people to listen to me, because I have zero authority online. Nobody knows who the fuck I am. I'm not this big roided out bodybuilder. I could get pretty shredded, but if compared to like the internet models, I'm not that impressive. I'm not ugly.
Right.
I'm not this ugly dude, but I'm not super good looking model guy. So it's like, okay, I got to figure out how to create some authority.
That's what you got Adam for, right?
Yeah, exactly. I got to come out with some authority so that people will pay attention and want to buy my product, because they don't know me from the next guy. So some of the ideas we threw around were, write a book, because if you're an author, people see that. And the other one was podcast. Like, oh, I could do a podcast. Like, I think I could talk on a podcast. I don't have a problem talking and expressing myself. So that was kind of an idea that I was throwing around. During this period of time, I had been in conversation with Adam Schaefer, who you just mentioned. He's one of my co-hosts. Now, Adam Schaefer, I had known about previously, because we were both high-performing managers at 24 Hour Fitness. So when I first started my fitness career, when I was managing gyms, it was for 24 Hour Fitness. I would manage some of their flagship clubs. And I was, one of the top producers in the company, and he was one of the top producers in the company. So when you're one of the top guys in this competitive field, you know who the other guys are. So I'd heard Adam's name. I'd never met him. We had friends in common. Somebody that I had trained and developed ended up becoming, co-managing a gym with him. So they became friends. So every once in a while I'd talk to this guy and he'd be like, oh, you got to meet Adam. Like, you and him, you guys should start a business together. You guys will be so awesome. So I kept hearing that. And, little did I know he was hearing the same thing. So we kept hearing about each other. So now we're on social media. This is now fast forward right back to where I had created MAPS. We're on social media. Adam is building a social media following, because he's got his own ideas of how he's going to, build a business through social media. At this point, I think he had like 20,000 followers on Instagram, and he was a professional physique competitor. And his whole idea was he was going to go pro. He's going to go fat to fit, because at this point he let himself get out of shape. So he's going to get real fit and become a pro and leverage that to build this social media following. So I was kind of following that, and I thought that was really cool. and I'd watched an interview with Adam after he won his pro card. It was on this, some guy interviewed him afterwards, and I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's pretty charismatic. I like the way he presents himself. So we're talking back and forth. I create this sales video for MAPS Anabolic, and I'm thinking, oh, I should send this to Adam. I'd like to get his opinion on this. I think his opinion would be valuable. So I send him the sales video. I'm like, hey man, would you mind watching this? Let me know what you think. So I send it to him, and he calls me back like right away. He must have watched it right away. Calls me back a couple hours later, and he's like, dude, great video. Like, you're right on the same wavelength as I am. So we start talking about the fitness industry. We start talking about how things need to change, how the message needs to change, how effective we think our message would be at that moment. Like, we were talking like, holy shit, man, if we could just get people to pay attention to what we're saying, we think we'll blow people's minds. And nobody's saying this. Nobody has this counter common knowledge message. Nobody's saying, hey, this information that everybody thinks is true is complete bullshit, and here's why it's bullshit, and here's why they've been lying to you, and here's the real information. And so we're talking on the phone, and we're both like, let's start a podcast. Like, let's do this. I had already been thinking about it. Adam had already been thinking about it. It was decided over the phone. Let's meet because we need to start a podcast. So I end up going, and at this point, what I'm thinking in my head is, okay, let's start a podcast. It would be a great way to build my authority so that I could sell some of these programs. So then people will know that I'm not full of shit because they'll listen to me on the podcast. They'll give me an opportunity. And at that point, I'll be able to eventually sell my fitness programs because I'll have built authority. And Adam, smart guy, charismatic guy, great guy to have as a co-host. He's a pro physique competitor. Holy shit. If I can get him to talk about, MAPS, what a great way to sell them. That's what I'm thinking, right?
Well, and the other thing about having Adam is he already had the following, too.
That's right. He had a small following, but he had a following. I had no following, right? So, in social media land, 20,000 followers isn't a ton, but it's at least something, right? So I go to his house. It's Adam, Justin, and at the time, Craig Capurso, who was part of the original MAPS concept. And Craig Capurso was a bodybuilding.com sponsored athlete. He had like 40,000 followers. So that was cool, right? So I'm like, oh shit, if I can get these two guys to, like my MAPS program, it's totally going to work out or whatever. So I go there, I show up at Adam's house, and I'm thinking, all right, let's see what happens. I meet everybody, we sit down, and it's fire. Like, we didn't shut up for probably 3 or 4 hours. Like, it's just nonstop, back and forth. We're, talking about the fitness industry, talking about the trends, talking about projections, where we see it's going. We're talking about, one of the things that I really wanted to make clear when I got there was, one thing for me that I value tremendously for me that I place as a very high, or at least I try to make it a part of my character, a priority of my character, and something that I value in other people is integrity. I really value integrity. Like, just be honest, be who you are, tell the truth, even if the truth is, not, expedient or easy. And I'll respect the hell out of you, even if I disagree with you. But, I want honesty. And fitness is full of liars. It's just a bunch of bullshit. It's a bunch of, lose weight, 30 pounds in 30 days, taking my, Fit Slim tea, or take these pills and do this and that. And it's just a bunch of, these before and after pictures that are photoshopped, and all these Instagram pages that are photoshopped, and just bullshit, right? So I'm like, I want to be honest as hell, like super honest, which probably means a supplement company will not come near us with a 10-foot pole, which is how people make money, but so be it. So I sit down.
You're not sacrificing your integrity either, though, right?
Well, that's right. And it was, and part of me was also understood that because industry of fitness has been around now for at least a couple decades, mainstream, right? Gyms have been mainstream for a while. People know diets now for a while. A lot of people have tried to lose weight. A lot of people have tried to work out. That I think the message of honesty, the gamble was that we thought or at least I thought at this point, that the message of honesty was going to resonate because people now are understanding like fitness is full of shit. Like at that point, if you tell somebody diets and supplements are bullshit, you'll get a lot of people who be like, yeah, I know, I've tried a lot of them. They just don't work, right? So I thought, well, this is going to resonate and it's different, and there's no other way for me to do it anyway. This is just the way I'm going to be. So I sit down and I'm telling them, like, this is what I want to do. I want to be brutally honest. I don't want to pull any punches, and I want to be uncensored. And everybody was like, fuck yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. Like, I didn't have to convince everybody. Everybody was on the same page. So it was like perfect. We started Mind Pump, and that was it. And, you know, the one change we made with Mind Pump was originally it was with Craig Purcell. We had 4 hosts, but and we recorded 4 episodes. But Craig was a sponsored athlete by bodybuilding.com and by Cellucor. And before we dropped the episodes, so it took us 3 months, recorded 10 episodes, got everything set up, ready to launch, ready to drop all the episodes. Craig shared a couple of the episodes with his bosses at Cellucor and bodybuilding.com because we're uncensored. I mean, we go off the rails. We'll talk about anything. Sometimes that means we're going to talk about, you know, inappropriate stuff that has nothing to do with fitness, like sex or, you know, whatever. It might be our sense of humor because we're a bunch of guys. It might be controversial fitness stuff, like we're going to say, you know, protein powders are extremely processed food, and they should not be considered health food, which is very controversial at the time, especially in fitness because fitness is run by supplement companies. So Craig was a little nervous that he might piss off his sponsors. So he sends them these episodes and is like, what do you think? And they reply, hilarious, super entertaining. Definitely don't think you should do this because you're going to harm the brands. So Craig calls us up and he's like, I gotta pull out. This is like 2 days before we drop the episodes. I gotta pull out. So 3 months of work and all the stuff, and our top social media following guy, who we were kind of banking on, like we were banking on his reach to give us because it's hard to get through the noise at first, like to get your foothold, right? It's one of the hardest challenges in starting a social media business or a podcast is just getting the ball rolling. Like, who's going to listen to me at first when nobody knows who I am? So that was like, oh shit, you know, Craig's dropping out. We wasted 3 months of time, and we don't have his social media presence now. Fuck, what are we going to do? So, you know, now he did it through text. So I see the text. I'm like, son of a bitch. So I prepare myself to call Adam and Justin and motivate them to continue on with Mind Pump. I literally had gave myself 5 minutes to construct this speech, and I really pride myself in being able to communicate effectively and motivate people.
You did the Tony Robbins, right? All right, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, so I'm like, exactly. So I'm thinking in my head like, all right, I'm gonna don't, you know, this sucks, kind of crapped out, but I'm gonna get on the phone and I'm gonna fucking pump these guys up, and we're gonna just keep doing it. So I get everybody on the phone, conference call, and before I can say anything, Adam is like, fuck that, we're going to keep doing this, we're going to re-record the episodes and do it on our own. And Justin's like, oh, exactly what I was going to say. I didn't even get a chance to try to motivate these fuckers. They were already on that plane, and that's when I knew these are the dudes, man. You know, all of us are bound by our value of integrity. All of us feel like we have a higher purpose for what we're doing because we want to save people from the traps of the modern fitness industry. We want to communicate the right information. All of us are, you know, it's hard to stop us once we're on that path. And that was probably the best, you know, signal that I could get. After that happened, I was like, for sure, this is the team, and we're going to fucking do this. And that's what happened. We started the podcast, and within a short period one of our first episodes 3 years ago, I think it was episode number 3, was why Mind Pump doesn't CrossFit.
Yeah, that was one that ruffled quite a few feathers, right?
Oh, I mean, CrossFit's a major brand. CrossFit is also not a brand that sits there and lets themselves get poked at. if you poke at CrossFit or you point something out, they'll fight back, and they're litigious as fuck. I remember, the major personal training certification organizations like NASM, and I forgot the other one, was saying stuff like CrossFit is dangerous, and CrossFit sued them, and so it was this big legal battle. And so, you just don't do it. You just don't go after. Plus, people who do CrossFit are very, CrossFit does an excellent job of building an incredible community with CrossFit.
Yes.
But with that community comes that like tribe mentality. And if you say something negative about CrossFit, you're going to get a bunch of CrossFitters, the community, and CrossFit itself is going to come fuck with you. So we're a podcast, and our first episode is basically talking about all the things we don't like about the fitness programming of CrossFit. And we were like, no punches were pulled, no holds barred. So we aired that episode, and it went, kind of viral-ish, for podcasts. Viral for podcasts is like thousands of episodes, right? It's not millions like if it was YouTube. But we got a bunch of downloads, and people were sharing it because it was really controversial. Nobody was doing that. I get, or at least our main Instagram page for Mind Pump we had started, we get a message from CrossFit headquarters. And CrossFit headquarters is like, pull that episode. CrossFit is not, our programming is not dangerous. You don't know what you're talking about. Pull your episode, or we will send you a cease and desist letter or whatever.
Send it,
so
right?
Yeah. So we get that message, and we're like, fuck yeah. Like, it actually got to them.
Yes.
This is crazy. Like, this is, like, awesome. I can't believe that. And by the way, we're very careful. Like, when we say stuff about stuff like that, it's our opinion, and we made sure that we knew we're not saying anything that is inaccurate in the sense that it's our opinion. So
yeah, you're not out here saying, by the way, this is fact. This is
no,
I'm just saying this is how I feel.
I've been training people for 20 years. This is based off of my experience, and I'm going to explain how, and I'm going to make a good case by it. And if you want to shut me up, you can go fuck yourself. Like, good luck.
Yeah, I always wondered how they worked their programming. I thought maybe they just closed their eyes and threw a dart at the board. I didn't know there was an actual program for that.
To CrossFit's credit, a lot has improved since we did that. It's also a very free market approach where you've got some schools that are really, really good, and you've got a lot that were really bad. Well, 3 years later, today, those bad schools are gone, and the good ones have grown.
Well, yeah, and the other good thing about CrossFit is it's gotten people exercising, period, that might normally not have actually stepped out of their comfort zone, right? Oh,
it's got people barbell deadlifting and squatting. I mean, when I was managing gyms, back in the day, let's see, 15 years or more ago, nobody was deadlifting and squatting. There was one squat. I'd have a 40,000 square foot facility. We'd have one squat rack, and it would have dust on it.
Yeah, only the power lifters would use it, right?
Yeah, and there was no power lifters in 25. It was all, everybody's information was either from bodybuilders or fitness magazines. Nobody was doing that shit. CrossFit did a lot of really good things for fitness. They also, a lot of the programming was terrible. Like, you're doing these complex weightlifting movements like a overhead snatch or a clean in a fatigue-based circuit-type program, which is terrible because your form breaks down and you hurt yourself. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. We talked a lot about that. But anyway, CrossFit comes after us. We're like, this is great. They made some pretty silly statements when they were messaging with me back and forth. So we did a second episode called CrossFit Part 2, why we still don't like CrossFit. And so that was it. And that kind of gave us that first little kick of the ball rolling. And, in those early days, we had a lot to say about a lot of the bad shit. And so we went after everybody. We went after supplement companies. We went after bodybuilding. We went after, shitty personal trainers. We went after the gym model and why that's not helping to promote fitness. And that kind of got us our start. It was all no holds barred. We're still very no holds barred. We're just a lot more, experienced now. So we just communicate a little bit better. We might not drop as many F-bombs as we did in those early days when we were kind of nervous when we were on the podcast.
Right.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. And it resonated with people. It did make it very hard to monetize, though. I'll tell you that much. Like, in fitness, the companies that will pay you in fitness are usually supplement companies. And supplement companies didn't want to touch us because we were saying things like artificial sweeteners, bad, artificial, highly processed anything, bad. Most supplements, waste of your money. Take that money and invest it in personal training or invest it in exercise programming. And, so we didn't have any sponsors at all. And we didn't monetize the podcast for about a year. After about a year, we had enough demand where we decided we would start monetizing. We started selling MAPS Anabolic, and that was it. And then the rest is kind of history.
Yeah. Now fast forward, you're over 700 episodes now, right?
We are.
Yeah. So, I mean, over the course of all those episodes, do you have a few guests that really stand out to you that were some of your favorites to interview?
I love the thing that I love, is it the most? It's hard. I love so many things about what I do now. One of the things I love the most about podcasting is I have this incredible leverage because I have a podcast, especially now that my podcast is big. I have this leverage to be able to talk to people that I want to talk to. So in the past, if I wanted to talk to, an influencer, like say Dorian Yates, right? He was Mr. Olympia when I was into bodybuilding as a kid.
Yep.
If I wanted to talk to Dorian Yates, good luck. Like to have an actual conversation with Dorian Yates, I might be able to meet him at a fitness expo, shake his hand, smile and take a picture. But actually sit down and talk for an hour or more and ask questions, like that's not going to happen. But now that I have a podcast, I can message the guy and be like, hey man, I got a podcast. We got this many downloads. Love to have you come in on my show. And he's probably going to be like, cool. And now I can have him on my show and I can ask him whatever I want. So it's freaking awesome. So now I have this opportunity to do that, and it has accelerated my growth and learning tremendously, like incredibly. Like I had Paul Chek on my show now 2 times. Paul Chek is the godfather of wellness. So wellness is everything that encompasses total health. So that's fitness. Fitness, performance, mobility, strength, flexibility, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. That's nutrition, how to eat for fitness, but also how to eat for health, how to eat for your psychology, how to eat, like just eating in general, period. Also, mental health, spiritual health, just overall how to be a healthy human being. That's what wellness is. Well, Paul Chek is the godfather of that, of fitness, wellness. He was combining high-performance fitness with, wellness, with meditation, with all the shit back in the 80s and 90s when everybody was like, this guy was talking about the gut microbiome in the 90s when nobody knew what the hell he was talking about or thought that was absolutely crazy. He was talking about fasting. He was training on a physio ball. He'd bring his physio ball into gyms and lift weights on it, and people would laugh at him. This is in the 80s and 90s. He's a godfather of wellness. Now, he's a very eccentric individual, extremely intelligent. Sometimes will talk on tangents, hard to follow, but he's a fucking brilliant dude, and he's like I said, he's a godfather. He's a legend. So interviewing him was amazing, and the stuff I learned from him like blew me the fuck away. And it's funny because the things that I learned from him while interviewing him are what people would consider basic and silly, but they're not. They're actually foundational things. And for someone who'd been in fitness as long as I have, to learn these things the way that I did just from interviewing him were mind-blowing. And I'll give you a couple of them. One was, before we podcasted with him, we had dinner with Paul, and we were eating food, or actually the food was served to us. And right before he ate, he brought his head down, closed his eyes, and kind of brought his hands up over his food, and looked like he was praying. I couldn't figure out what he was doing. It looked like he was praying. And he did that he was there for 30 seconds. And then he kind of comes up and starts eating. And I made note of that. I'm like, well, that's weird. I don't know Paul. I knew Paul was very spiritual. I don't know he was particularly religious. So I thought maybe it was like a religious thing. Okay, I'll make sure to ask him about that on the podcast. And so I did. We interview him. I'm like, Paul, I noticed you, looked like you were praying or something before you ate your food. Like, are you religious? What is that? And he goes, no. He goes, what I'm doing is I'm asking my body if it wants to receive this food, and I'm asking my spirit if it wants to receive this food, and I'm asking, and I'm looking at the food and asking the food if it's going to feed me in the way I want to be fed. And he's doing this whole, and I'm butchering it, but he does this whole process. And at first I'm hearing it, I'm like, well, that's ridiculous. It's basically you're praying. Like, why would you do that? And then I thought about it. This was the next day. So at first I'm talking to him about it, and I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting, but whatever. And we talked about this stuff. The next day I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, this is kind of weird. If you look at every major religion in every corner of the globe, every religion has some kind of a practice that looks like that before food, before eating. Christians will pray before they eat. People will be, Native Americans will, thank the food for, like if they kill an animal, they'll thank the food for thank them for providing sustenance for them and all that other stuff. And everybody does it. Like every major religion, every major culture does it across all the continents. All these people never communicating with each other, and all these cultures develop this practice. And whenever you see that, this is something that's good to know. Whenever you see a practice that is common in cultures for thousands of years and in cultures that never communicated with each other, there's something to it. There's a reason why humans do it. It's evolved. It's existed. It's lasted because it served us. So I'm thinking to myself, like, what is it? Is it just a religious thing? Like, is it just a spiritual thing? Because people believe in a fictitious God or whatever you think or whatever. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, let's apply that to modern life. Let's imagine the average person who's trying to lose weight, and you have a crappy diet. And they wake up in the morning, they're late for work, and they reach for a Pop-Tart. But before they eat the Pop-Tart, they stop, and they look at the Pop-Tart, and then they ask themselves, is this going to feed my body in the best way possible, or in the way that I need to be fed right now? Is this going to feed my spirit? Is this something that is serving me? If you just stopped and did that before you ate, before every meal, you probably would make better food choices. You know what I'm saying? You're probably taking a second to become aware of what you're about to do, because I knew as a personal trainer, it doesn't have to be prayer, it doesn't have to be anything. I knew as a personal trainer that a large percentage of the shitty food that we eat is mindless. A large percentage of it is just we're not super aware of what we're doing. Like, how often do we stop and think about what we're about to do? Like, honestly think about it. Like, be a little mindful about it. Now, sometimes that means you might eat the Pop-Tart. Sometimes it means, well, yeah, I want to eat this Pop-Tart because it's my birthday and I'm hanging out with my friends and we're having a lot of fun, so this is going to feed my body the way I want. But most of the time, you're going to say, well, if I'm going to be honest, this is not really going to feed me the way I want. In fact, what this is going to feed is to distract me, and the sugar is feeding a craving because I'm stressed out because I'm late for work or whatever. You're just going to become more mindful and you'll make better food choices. So that blew me the fuck away, and I learned that from interviewing Paul Chek. The other thing that I learned from him was to chew my food. And as crazy as that sounds, and as simple as that sounds, I noticed that when we were eating dinner, the man didn't take a single sip of water. I was like, that's kind of weird, because the way I eat is I would inhale my food. I'd chew 3-4 times, drink a gulp of water, swallow my food. And I learned this because this is I developed this habit because I wanted to build muscle as a kid, and I'd shove food down my throat. And so the faster I can get it down, the more I could eat, and the better, more calories I could eat. So I asked him about that too. I'm like, why do you do that? And he goes, obviously chewing your food is a big part of digestion. It's the first step. And when you chew your food, you increase its surface area, allows the bacteria in your gut to break it down. You're able to absorb nutrients better, this, that, and the other. And one of the biggest culprits for poor digestion or malabsorption is not chewing your food. And he also said, if you drink a lot of water while you eat, it also dilutes the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, doesn't break down, doesn't do that, the other. And I think to myself, like, wow, humans evolved for the most part, probably not having water with them every single time they ate. You know what I mean? Like, they ate their food, and I'm sure they didn't have a cup of water with them right next to them. They probably would drink by the stream. And so they probably learned how to chew really well, and choking meant you died. So interesting. And I thought to myself, like, wow, I always drink a lot of water when I eat. So I stopped doing that. I stopped drinking water while I ate. I waited till, I either drank the water way before or way after. And what I noticed was I chewed a lot more, my digestion got a lot better, and I slowed down and became more mindful of my eating. I was more conscious and connected to what I was eating, which then allowed me to connect how I felt with the food, which helped me connect which foods make me feel better, which meant now I like the foods that made me feel better and I dislike the foods that make me feel not as good, which meant now when I actually had a craving, I had created a new a new pathway or a new association with this food because I liked it, because it made me feel better. So now I actually wanted more of it, and blew me away. So Paul Chek really did that for me. Another person that we interviewed that really blew me away was Dr. Terry Walls. Dr. Terry Walls is a scientist who got multiple sclerosis, and modern Western medicine has zero answer for MS, and she degenerated terribly. And so, being a smart individual, she did her own research and came up with the Walls protocol, which basically echoes a lot of what I had been learning in terms of the immune response to food and all that stuff, and how important it was to avoid heavily processed food. So after that, I really increased my vegetable intake, and I really started looking at food, even more accurately, so to speak. So she was very impactful. Tom Bilyeu, on a business level, really impactful. What I learned from him was, he built a business around, he built Quest bars, which became the first $1 billion or fastest $1 billion, supplement company, if you will, at the time. And he had to actually invent the machinery to create his bars because the machines didn't exist. And I thought that was fucking fascinating. And what I learned from that was, sometimes you got to break the rules and make new rules in order to do what you feel is right or what's going to, be best. So I'd say those three probably stand out the most at this moment.
Okay, good. One that I listened to, because I listened to their podcast as well, was Brendan Schaub. How was that? I mean, obviously, as far as the wellness side, I mean, you guys didn't really dive too deep into that, but how was that just chatting with him? Like, that guy, he cracks me up when I listen to him, on the podcast too. So I was kind of curious how that was having him.
What I learned from Brendan Schaub is what I learned from Jordan Harbinger and other excellent podcasters is how to podcast better. So Brendan Schaub, excellent storyteller, very charismatic, very natural. And so when you sit down and you interview with someone like that, you learn that podcasting is an art. There's an art to communication. There's an art to the interview, to keeping your audience engaged, and to being impactful. And so when I sit with guys like that, like Jordan Harbinger is another guy. Like I sit and when I'm interviewing him and I'm watching how he's talking and how he's transitioning to another topic, and I'm just like, oh, wow, that's a whole nother level of podcasting. So I really appreciate podcasting those kind of guys, because every time I do, I feel like I get up, I become a little bit better as a podcaster myself.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess I'm going to switch things up and go back to something you touched on earlier. I was going to let you dive into it. That was when you said you had some issues with your health going south. Could you kind of tell us what happened with that?
Oh, yeah. So probably, I think right around the age of 30, my digestion just started to go bad. Now, I'd always had some digestive issues. I had developed a lactose intolerance. I noticed that, if I would randomly have digestive issues more than the average person, but that was kind of the extent of it. Well, all of a sudden, and keep in mind, I'm a fitness guy, so I think I'm eating healthy too, right? So I'm eating chicken breasts, whole grains. I'm taking a lot of protein powders and supplements, oatmeal, that kind of stuff, pasta, things that I thought, I'm hitting my macros, I'm healthy. I, out of nowhere, it seemed, at least, in hindsight it wasn't, but it seemed at least, out of nowhere, my digestion just went terrible, and I had severe, irritable bowel issues. I was losing weight. Everything I ate went right through me. If you've ever had real digestive issues, serious ones that last, you you're malnourished. Your body becomes weak. You look terrible. Your eyes are sunken in. You're not absorbing nutrients. You're weak. You try to work out, forget it. You're not going to be strong. Got no stamina. Your mind is cloudy. I'm trying to train clients, and I lost 15 pounds, and doctor couldn't figure out what it was. It lasted for a little while, and I just felt terrible. And it was hard for me because, number one, it was attacking my number one insecurity, which was to be weak and not strong. It's one of the reasons I was motivated to lift weights in the first place, is I was a skinny kid growing up. So I was like, oh my God, I'm losing 15 pounds. I feel weak. It was also scary. Like, do I have Crohn's disease? Like, what's going on? And I couldn't figure it out because I thought I knew what healthy eating was. At the time in my wellness facility, I had a couple staff members who were on the wellness side. Now, at this point, I wasn't a wellness person. I was a fitness person. I knew exercise. I knew fitness. I knew fats, carbs, and proteins, and that was about it. Could make you lean, could build muscle. Didn't know too much about health beyond that. But I was really good at the exercise portion. These two young ladies really understood wellness on a different level. And they would always tell me, like, Sal, you might want to avoid eating these types of foods, or you might want to not take so many protein powders, and went in one ear out the other. Well, at this point, like I couldn't figure out what's going on. Doctors telling me, take kaopectate, and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, that's not solving the problem. And so I finally went to them and said, okay, I'll do whatever you tell me. Like, what do I need to do? So one of the girls is like, okay, we got to do an elimination diet. It sounds like you have food intolerances. Sounds like you're developing some autoimmune issues. Let's start with that. And so I did this process of really surrendering, and I stopped focusing on being strong and muscular and fit, and I just wanted to be healthy. I just wanted my body to be healthy and to feel good. And this was about a year of elimination diet and I had to be very strict. At this point, my immune system was so reactive that if I had the smallest amount of a food that I was intolerant to, like gluten or dairy or peanuts or egg whites, for example, that I would have terrible digestion for, a week, even if I had the smallest amount. So I had to be vigilant. So I eliminated most supplements. I went on elimination diet, and I started to adjust my training, because if you push your body too hard, that promotes inflammation, which just makes it harder for your gut to heal and all this other stuff. And paradigm shattering moment. I learned about true wellness, and the side effect of all of this, the irony of this all, was that I became more muscular and leaner, easier than I'd ever had before. My body settled into this really fit, look. I looked aesthetic. I felt good. I became more in tune with my body. I understood exercise better as a result. And it was incredible. I understood things on a completely different level. So, it was a tough, difficult period of time. It was a little scary, especially in the beginning, but I needed it to turn me into, or at least to give me the impetus for who I am now in terms of how I communicate wellness and fitness.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? I mean, just eating or living to feel better will just automatically give you kind of the look you wanted anyways. Instead of eating chicken breast, rice, counting carbs and calories all day, if you're just eating clean whole foods or real foods, it's mind blowing what difference it can make, right?
Absolutely.
And then it's funny, we don't think about that until we're in a position where we're sick, and now all of a sudden, we want to fix, years and years of bad habits.
Well, real change doesn't come from being comfortable, usually.
Yep.
Like, unless you're like really seek out, if you're super growth minded and you really seek out uncomfortable situations to, help you change. Very few people, by the way, are good at this, and even the ones that are do it very rarely, because it's a tough practice. But most real effective change is started from an incredible challenge, because it pushes us so much that we're really uncomfortable, and now we have the impetus for dramatic lifestyle change. So if I didn't have that, I don't think I would have changed.
Yeah, amen, man. I'm glad that glad you got that sorted out. That was actually one of my listener questions, was kind of how you dealt with the having a sensitive gut, because that's something that you're going to have to be mindful of probably your whole life, right?
Well, it's gotten a lot better. So healing your gut takes a long time. Okay, so if you've got bad gut issues, and a lot of people do, give yourself some time. You're not going to fix it in a month. I had the first year was elimination diet and strict adherence to it. So I had to be vigilant. I used cannabis during that period of time. Cannabis, especially high CBD cannabis, helped with the gut inflammation. So I used that pretty regularly, not during the day, but I would use it at night. Probiotics helped. And after that first year, little by little, I've been able to reintroduce some of the foods, and my body doesn't react nearly as strong. They're still not good for me. Like if I eat gluten every day, I'm still going to start to feel terrible. But if I eat gluten, 1 weekend or 2 weekends in a row, it's not going to destroy me, and I'll be okay. Whereas before, if I just had the smallest crumb of bread, or I was so reactive that it would cause a problem. But I had to I had to allow my gut to heal because I had such terrible gut issues. So, and that just means the inflammation comes down, your gut lining heals, your mucosa lining heals, and that could take years.
Did you ever get skin issues too from that? A lot of people have like eczema that comes on too, and a lot of that can come from gut issues as well. I didn't know.
I would get hives sometimes, which is interesting. So, but I didn't have the eczema and psoriasis.
Okay. Well, while I'm on the listener questions, you mind if I just go through a couple more here?
Sure.
Now, how do you deal with a client that buys a large package, a huge, tons of sessions from you, but they don't have a specific goal in mind? They just say, hey, I want you to do everything for me. I mean, how do you approach that?
So they don't have a goal?
No, they just say, hey, get me in shape. And, well,
that's a goal.
Yeah, the broadest of ones. I mean, I meant more of a specific goal. How do you get them to rattle off what they really want?
Well, you just dig a little deeper. So if somebody says to me, yeah, I want to hire you because I want to get in shape, then I'll say, well, what does in shape mean for you? And then they'll be a little bit more specific. And then I'll say, well, how do you mean? And then we'll go a little bit deeper. And I'll say, why do you want to achieve that? And we'll go a little deeper. So you just go a little bit deeper and ask them. The other thing, too, is you, as a trainer, your job is also to establish some goals for them as well. So if somebody tells me, I want to get in shape, well, how do you mean? I want to feel better. Well, what do you mean by that? How do you mean by feel better? How do you feel now? Oh, I need more energy. Okay, so you want more energy for work, or for when you wake up, or for sports? Oh, when I wake up in the morning. Okay, that's good. What else? Oh, I'd like to lose weight. Excellent. I'd like to get stronger. Excellent. So you get a little deeper. And then what I'll say is, these are great goals, very specific goals. This is what we're going to work towards. But before we can get there are a few things that we need to accomplish so that we can get there effectively and efficiently, and also so that when you do get there, it sticks around. And one of the first things that we need to work on is we need to train your body so that it can move properly, because there's some exercises that I want to work with you on that are super effective. Like if you get good at barbell squatting, and you get good at deadlifting, and you get good at overhead pressing, your results are going to fly. But before we can start doing those, I have to get you to be able to do them effectively. So for the first however long, a few months or month or whatever, we're going to focus on mobility and control in order to get you. Does that get you there? Does that make sense? And they'll usually agree. And so you need to establish those goals well, but sell them so that they know that, okay, I can see why I'm doing all this balance and stability work, or, stretching or whatever before I do the hard workouts. It's because that's what I need to do before I can do the effective workouts. So, part of it is you dig deeper, and the other part of it is you need to also, sell and communicate effectively the goals that allow the person to get to those goals.
Okay, thank you. And then next one here is one food that could make you relapse, your weakest or one that you have the hardest time saying no to.
That I have the hardest time saying no to. It's funny. I mean, I really like potato chips. That's probably one of my favorites. It's funny because I'm at a point now where, if I eat something it's because I want to. And what I mean by that is we create this interesting phenomena within ourselves where we look at, let's say you really like donuts, right? But you're trying to lose weight. So you're at the office and someone buys a box of donuts and you're looking at the donut and you say to yourself, damn, I really want that donut, but I can't have it. I can't have it because I'm going to lose weight. So I can't have it, but I really want it. Like that creates a very interesting internal dialogue. What's happening in that is what you've done literally is you've actually divided yourself. You've created a side of you or a separate you that is the dictator you. This is the person telling you you can't eat that because you're trying to lose weight. So you've actually done this psychologically. You've created this separate you.
So there's a battle going on inside your head the whole time, right? A back and forth battle.
Right. Yeah, and then there's this other you that's like the kid that wants to eat it but can't because the dictator says don't. Now, that might be effective in the short term, but in the long term it's terrible because what you're really creating is, and by the way, the one you identify with is not the dictator you. The one you identify with is the kid that is being told not to.
He's going to rebel.
Because when you ask somebody, right, if you ask somebody, do you want to eat that donut, why don't you have that donut? They're going to say, I can't. Like, what do you mean you can't? Of course you can. Like that's very strange. So you're identifying with the you that is the kid that wants to eat that donut and the dictator you saying no, and that sucks long term because at some point you're going to rebel. Nobody wants to be told. Nobody likes to be forced to do something. Nobody likes tyranny, right? Mm-hmm. So, I'm not. I've identified that, so I'm not really in that state. So if I see a donut, then either I want to eat it or I don't. Now, what does that mean? Now, I can not want to eat that donut, but understand that it's going to taste really good and that I'm going to enjoy chewing on it and swallowing it and tasting it and smelling it. Like, I identify all that. I can acknowledge that donut tastes really damn good and that I have a craving for that donut. But I don't want to eat it. Now, why don't I want to eat it? Well, I don't want to eat it because I've gone through the trouble of separating myself into two separate individuals, and I've gone through the trouble of creating a dictator to tyrannize me into not eating it. So obviously, the more important thing to me is that I lose the weight. So in reality, I don't want to eat that donut. And so it changes everything when you do that. Now when I look at that donut, I think to myself, wow, I know that really tastes good, but I don't want to eat it. And I don't. It's not a fucking problem at all. And so it changes everything and it makes everything a lot easier. Now, sometimes I'll look at that donut. Let's say I'm with my friends and we're at this donut place that's really good and I'm hanging out with everybody and we're having a great time. And I look at the donut and I'm like, man, I'm really craving that donut. It tastes really good. I'm having a lot of fun with my friends. This is something we're all going to share the experience of. You know what? I want to eat that donut. I know it's going to make my body feel bad. I know it's not good for my health. I know, it might not work with my body composition goals, whatever. However, right now what's more important to me is connecting with my friends over this experience and tasting that donut. So I want to eat it, so I'm going to. So it changes everything. So when people say, like, what food throws you off or whatever, I either want to or I don't. So if I go and eat a bag of potato chips, I've decided I want to eat it. It's not me being like, I can't. Oh no, I just did. I'm giving, I'm rebelling against. It's none of that. It's a completely different thought process.
Yeah, and that, I imagine that goes back to the mindfulness too. You're going to enjoy that donut for 5 minutes, but then there might be hours of, feeling like crap after eating it, right?
Right.
Okay, and then I think I had one more here. What do you think about the future of social media and how it applies to exercise and health and wellness and fitness?
Well, social media is such a powerful tool, technology in general, right? The greatest decentralizer of power mankind has ever witnessed. Period. End of story. Nothing's decentralized power more effectively than technology, and social media does that now, where anybody with a phone is a journalist and can post a viral video. Anybody with an opinion has the potential to be heard by millions of people. So it's incredible and incredibly valuable. That being said, like anything that's been powerful and incredible in human history, it can be abused, and it just like anything. So it reminds me of the processed food revolution when we really discovered how to make food, engineer it to be super highly palatable, and also engineer it so that it has a long shelf life. I mean, that was a huge breakthrough. Like, you know how much food got wasted because it went bad, and we're not able to ship it to our soldiers or ship it to poor people in other countries, or change the palatability of food so that people can eat things and whatever. Like, that's a great, and it's a huge accomplishment. But the bad side of that now is it tastes so goddamn good and it's so cheap that people eat. That's all they eat, and their health goes bad. So we've had to now learn to moderate ourselves and to control how we consume this new powerful tool. The same thing is true with social media. It's just so new that nobody really knows that we need to moderate yet. Right now, it's this new thing. It's cool. So people are on their phones, on social media. Kids are just inundated by it, obsessed with it, and it's become a problem because we're not moderating it. So with any powerful tool, you have to have a certain foundational belief system, ethical system, and moral system that, just like you do with food, just like when you say, okay, I know that potato chips, French fries, pizza, and cake is delicious, but I also know the bad parts about it, so I need to moderate myself and not consume it all the time because that's going to be bad. Same thing with social media. I think people in the future are going to understand that, and they're going to moderate it, but not until we start to see big-time bad effects. I think that's going to come first. First, we're going to see huge – we're already seeing it. Suicide rate amongst teenagers exploded something like 40% from 2010 to 2015, which is insane, and it completely, correlates to the rise and use of smartphones and social media. And really, that's the only factor that we can even figure is a new thing to cause that spike in suicide. We know there's a strong correlation between, how many hours you're on these things and how depressed you are and how meaningless you feel your life is. So we're just starting to see the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to see a lot of bad shit happen from the abuse and overuse of social media, and then people are going to start to learn how to use it properly with moderation and ethics, and then it'll be fine.
Yeah, I think, like you said, with the younger kids that are on social media, the big problem they have is now if there's bullying at school or in person, they go home, they can't get away from it because it's there waiting in their inbox on Facebook or Instagram. It's
sure,
you can't get away. So now, of course, suicide rates are going to go up, because they have no, quote unquote safe space,
Right. Right.
Not that I'm a big advocate of, the safe space, but obviously for children, it's different,
Right.
So I guess all I had to ask for you was what's on the horizon for Mind Pump, and what is the end goal for you guys?
We're a media company, so the goal is to continue growing our media and our influence through our channels, through our YouTube channel, that's Mind Pump TV, through our podcast Mind Pump, through our internet blogs and articles on our website mindpumpmedia.com, but also through being a maven for other people who we think, in our opinion, are conveying the right message for health, wellness, and just for personal growth. So really, we want to be the conduit. We want to try and find these people and promote them. And we at one point in the future, we think we're going to be a channel that you tune into, and you have access to all these other awesome people that aren't Mind Pump at all.
Dude, that would be awesome. Well, man, I want to take this time and just thank you for coming on today, Sal, and for taking the time to talk to me. And
for sure,
if anyone's trying to reach out to you on Instagram or social media, can you just drop your handle there on Instagram?
Instagram is Mind Pump Sal, so that's where you'll find me personally.
Okay, and then the Mind Pump Media is just at Mind Pump Media, right?
You got it.
Okay, cool, man. Well, thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, my man.